do the setup of how I actually had this. So I said, okay, fine. Um, Basically, this project I started on, like I told you, um, I can show you when I first created this folder. Actually, it's not going to tell me now because I've changed so much stuff. 612. That was the yeah. You can see it there, the API key. So 612 was when I started this. Basically, it's Node.js, um, and I'm using Node.js in conjunction with Angular 9, and my backend is MongoDB. So you can see the Mongo backend here, um, and my users, um, post, comments, messages, groups. There's different sets of types. I mean, it's all the stuff that's needed for it to function is actually back here, and then some of these other DBs was from another project that I'm actually working on. Um, but to make a long story short, if you look at the app server, the Express, the configuration is not that complicated. Obviously, you need Express. You need there's some configuration that gets pulled in for the ports and some stuff. There's cores, cross-origin resource sharing stuff that you obviously need if you want to allow resources to be able to hit your server from another URL. Body parser. That's for parsing JSON, so on and so forth. Path. We're not gonna worry about that, but that's really just has to do with this stuff down here. I'll show you in a second. Um, Dot token is probably one of the most important things because you have to have this. And a lot of people they get into this idea where they think just because you implement a job token and all of a sudden you're secure. No, you have to think through the scenarios. It's not just enough to enable a token and say okay, I'm secure now. Just because you have to think that anybody logging into your system is going to get a token. So if I have a live token, I shouldn't be able to do whatever I want to within your system. There should be checks and balances. So that token has it's there for a reason. So you can deserialize it, obviously, at points in times to figure out who is this person that's making this particular request and what do they have access to make the request that they want to make. Things like that. So yeah, those are the types of things that you would use a token for, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. File upload. This is just to upload files. There's some encryption that takes place whenever you have to do passwords. So, like for instance, you don't want to ever record a password clear text. You want to make sure that you encrypt it. Use some sort of one-way hash, not a two-way hash, a one-way hash. The difference between the two, obviously, two-way hash is reversible. One-way hash is not. So you want to use a one-way hash for your passwords. Also, gravity here. If you ever went on Facebook and you've seen them, when you type or you copy and paste a link into like to the text box, it'll automatically pull down the content from the website, that's because it's using those meta tags that it pulls down, and that's what Gravity does, and that's the reason why I can actually do the same thing in the site that I've just built. Gravity will go out and grab it, and we'll handle it, and we'll see what the image is associated with it, what the description, what the name is, so on and so forth, and that will generate all that and give you that nice image. And this is actually pretty cool because you don't have to store uh, videos and certain things. Like for instance, if I want to get a clip from YouTube and write an article on it, I just need to take the URL, paste it in the box, and it'll pull down the metadata associated with it, and that'll link you to the site as opposed to trying to store the video somewhere. I mean, you wouldn't want to do that anyway because you don't have the obviously don't have the bandwidth to do stuff like that. Um, but MongoDB, obviously, you need that Mongo client, and then there's a port, there's a config URL that all comes back from the config up here. Express, you're gonna have different routers. I have a user router for handling user information, a news router that pulls down the news from the news API. There's a post router, there's a comments router, there's a message router that handles all the messaging. And I'm actually gonna rewrite this whole thing because I wanna redo how I've done the messaging. I'm not particularly fond of it, even though it works. I'm skeptical to say that it won't scale, but I have my doubts. group router. It's just for the groups and everything that I just created. And you can see here we're just using cores. These are directories. This is the public directory that the static HTML is going to be served from. Then you have these other directories for server upload and images. So when I upload images, like for instance, if you create a profile picture, it will take your user ID and it's going to name your picture, your profile picture after your user ID, your Mongo user ID that gets generated, that unique hash, and it's going to append whatever the suffix is for the specific image itself. Groups. Um, when you look at groups, it's the same deal. It just has a different directory. Obviously, you don't want to store all the images and stuff together, so group information goes into the groups directory. So this is just another directory that you can hit via URL, and this is how we make them available. And you can see here, this is what happens when you do slash. It'll send you the index.html file, whatever. This is how you use all the routers, and the routers are all different files, and they have the commands to access the MongoDB and deserialize the token and all this other stuff in there. These are just some side commands. I didn't put these in their own router, but um, essentially this one is just to upload information, and you can see here decodes the user ID from the token. It takes the file extension and then it just saves it, and then at the same time, um, actually, this one doesn't do it. The second one does. You'll see in this particular case, after the file is uploaded, it'll write that to the DB. So now we know what the associated path is for the image that is associated with the group. So that's how all that works. And here you can see where I'm deserializing the token, right? And one of the things that has to happen here, and I haven't done it yet, is the only person. This is a case a clear case of what I'm talking about. The only person, actually, I am doing it here. So if you look here, you says my query. You see where it says ID GID, and it says creator ID, decoded user ID. What this is basically saying is that if I'm gonna update the image for the group, right? You can upload this file, but I'm not going to associate it with the group unless the person is actually the person who created the group. So only the person who created the group can upload the group, can change the group image. Other than that, it won't work. Period. Um, and then what should happen is there should be another condition in here, up here, to where as we just check that initially to see whether or not that person is that person, and then we'll just kick them back if not. But that's the type of thing that I'm talking about with the security. And this is just the gravity thing that we talked about here. This is really simple. That's what actually goes out and grabs whatever the body URL is, and it'll actually return you back any of the metadata stuff. So that's pretty simple. If we jumped into one of these, I can jump into one of these controllers, um, and I can show you how it works. So if we go into the controllers, let's just say we went into groups router, you can see how this stuff sort of works as you're looking through it. I mean, it's a lot of code, um, but there are a lot of checks and balances in play that you have to check when you're doing certain things. Um, let's take for instance when we send out a group invite, right? You're sending a group invite, and you want to make sure that the person that is in the body of that request, who the invite is coming from, is actually the same person, right? Because if it's not the same person, that means someone's trying to hack and pretend to be somebody that they're not. This is what I mean when I say you can't just have a token and then assume that just because you have a token, you have security. You have to initially, you have to use that token in a manner to validate your security. That's what it's for. Right, so here we're checking, this is a user, and this is the invite. It's from the person. These two match. Okay, let's continue. And as we go down, we get the invite from, to, so on and so forth. And here we're just using some MongoDB commands. Add set just literally says, I'm going to put it there. If it's not there, if it is there, I'm not going to do anything, right? So some of these commands are really cool. Actually, after really working and using Mongo even more and more, I'm starting to despise RDBMSs. I think they're just the bane of a developer's existence. Like, I hate them. Mongo is just so much easier. You don't have to worry about having to create all these different relationships with foreign keys and all this. It's just you don't have to do any of that stuff. It really just follows more so object-oriented models of how you think and code as a developer. So for me, it's better. Obviously, there's pros and cons to using relational databases as opposed to this. But as these become more and more mature, I think you're going to see less and less of that stuff because Mongo can basically do just about anything else you can do in any of the other stuff. Um, but yeah, that gives you an idea. And I'm not gonna go through all this stuff, but that's the back end stuff um, of how all this works. And then the front end, you can see on the Angular side how I've actually broken this up. So you can see the app. You can see, I have my models directory. These are all the models. So like anything that I'm doing, I'm model, and I always use TypeScript. I do not code in legacy JavaScript. If you're doing it, you might as well. I mean, you're a barbarian. That's what you are. Okay, just let's just keep it 100. It's barbaric. If you're gonna use that, I mean, you're asking for trouble, right? If you're trying to build a large scale application, and in a large scale application, you're basically saying that, I'm gonna troubleshoot this when this gets to scale. It's a nightmare, right? Because if you're not strong typing your variables and you get to a certain point, um, if there's a logic error somewhere where a variable changes a type or something like that, you won't find it. You'll be sitting there for years trying to figure out where it is. So that's one of the reasons why I use TypeScript. Also, object-oriented functionality that it gives you, allowing to be created classes, interfaces, all these different things that are not there in legacy JavaScript. I don't want to say they're not there. They technically are there. You just have to know how to implement them because technically you are transpiling. You you're transpiling, and I use the word transpiled intentionally because everything that you do in this is actually getting compiled back down to ES5. So it's that's still happening anyway. But yeah, but all the models and everything is here, all laid out to capture all the information to go back to the Mongo side. And there's a lot of code in here that does a lot of nice things. A lot of different services. Um, yeah, group service. You basically have a service for every one of those routers that you saw that they interface with. So right now, like I said, I'm getting closer and closer and closing in on finishing this up. I probably say in another month, I'll probably have a good social media platform that I can actually stick in the cloud and auto scale and configure and do all this nice stuff with. I've already got a domain. I may actually change the domain because I want to open this up a little bit. Um, but yeah, I mean, like I said, the technical aspects of this stuff. Once you work with it a while and you know how to, you do some things. Um, it gets pretty easy. Even when I actually like, I'll walk into some things that I do just out of habit. Um, that some developers might not do. Like a lot of times, let me see if I can find one. Like technically, like this is something that you'll see me do a lot. I use pipe with take and one. Um, I do that a lot, and this gets into RxJS stuff like this. I tend to I I tend to like to be less chatty with certain things. If you notice that you use pipe with taken one, what you'll see is um, when you actually make that call to the subscription, it'll do it only one time. And then it'll automatically unsubscribe. So I don't have to worry about, these subscriptions, floating around and things like that in my, having memory leaks in my application where things stuff just, I don't have to do that because as soon as I actually do what I need to do, I unsubscribe. There are cases where that you wouldn't do that, particularly when you're using services because services are long lived. They're living the entire time anyway. But for a component that gets loaded, that's a little bit different scenario. But here, um, that's one of the things that I like to do. And in some other cases where I actually have a subscription that I keep open, then I'll actually use a subject to actually terminate that with ng on destroy. So you'll see some of that stuff in the code when I actually upload this ultimately. I'm thinking I'll stick it out there as a freeware type thing or whatever, so people can use it. I don't know. We'll see. Um, but yeah, it's I'm having fun with this. Um, you guys have any questions or whatever it is that you want to ask or pose to me about Angular 9 or any questions you want to pose about Node.js or MongoDB, feel free to reach out to me and ping me, and I can definitely help you out. All right.